The spring air inside First Light Baptist Church carried the scent of lilies and furniture polish. Estelle Whitaker sat in the third pew, not the front. She'd never been one for attention. Her navy dress crisp against the wooden seat, her hands folded over a worn leather wallet in her lap. Inside that wallet, tucked behind a grocery rewards card and her insurance information, was a photograph of Thomas. Her husband of 47 years smiled back at her through the plastic sleeve, his dark eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always had when he was genuinely happy. The photo was from their 40th anniversary, just 2 years before the stroke took him. 5 years. It had been 5 years since she'd sat beside him in this same church, their shoulders touching, watching their son accept his high school diploma. Now she sat alone, but today was different. Isaac James Whitaker. The name rang out across the sanctuary, and Estelle's breath caught. Her son, their son, strode across the platform in his cap and gown, diploma in hand, shoulders straight in that way Thomas had always stood. The congregation erupted in applause, and someone behind her shouted, "That's right, baby. You did it." Estelle recognized the voice. Gloria Patterson, her best friend of 40 years, who knew better than anyone what this moment cost, what it meant. Isaac accepted the diploma with a firm handshake, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found hers. He nodded once. She nodded back, her throat too tight for the smile she wanted to give him. Electrical engineering. Grade point average, 3.8. Job offers from 3 companies. Estelle opened the wallet in her lap, her thumb brushing over Thomas's photograph. He made it, she thought. Our boy made it. The memory came unbidden. Isaac at 10 years old, kneeling on their kitchen floor beside Thomas, watching his father replace an electrical outlet. Thomas's broad hands had moved with surprising delicacy, explaining wire colors, voltage, grounding, concepts that sailed over Estelle's head, but that Isaac absorbed like sunlight. "Hands can fix anything, son," Thomas had said. "You just gotta understand how things are connected." Isaac had looked up at his father with such reverence, such certainty, as if Thomas held all the answers to the universe in those calloused palms. Now, as the ceremony ended and families spilled onto the church lawn for photographs, Estelle stood beside her son, her hand resting lightly on his forearm. Isaac towered over her at 6'2", but she still saw that 10-year-old boy in his face, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the small scar above his left eyebrow from when he'd tripped running to show Thomas a lightning bug he'd caught. "You proud of me, Mama?" Isaac asked, his voice soft enough that only she could hear. "More than words can say," Estelle replied, squeezing his arm. If she had known then what was coming, the fractures already forming beneath the surface of her son's smile, would she have held him tighter? Would she have asked different questions? But she didn't know, and so she smiled for Gloria's camera and told herself the hardest part was over. She was wrong. 8 months later, on a gray Friday afternoon in November, Estelle was rinsing lettuce at her kitchen sink when she heard Isaac's car pull into the driveway. The engine cut off. Then silence. She dried her hands on a dish towel and moved to the window. Isaac sat in the driver's seat of his Honda Civic, both hands gripping the steering wheel, his forehead pressed against the rim. Even from this distance, she could see his shoulders shaking. Estelle's chest tightened. She was at the front door before she'd made a conscious decision to move. By the time she opened it, Isaac was climbing the porch steps, his face carefully blank, his messenger bag slung over one shoulder. But Estelle had raised this boy. She knew every micro-expression, every tell. "What happened?" she asked. Isaac stopped on the threshold, one hand on the door frame. For a moment, she thought he might cry. Instead, he laughed, short and bitter. "They let me go," he said. "Company restructuring. Last hired, first fired." "Oh, baby." Estelle stepped aside to let him pass. "I'm so sorry, but you're talented. You'll find something else. You have your degree, your references. I need to borrow some money." The words came out flat, emotionless. "Just until I get my severance check. Maybe $1,000? Estelle hesitated for only a heartbeat. "Of course. Let me get my checkbook." Isaac took the check without meeting her eyes. He promised to pay her back within 2 weeks. The weeks came and went. He never mentioned it again. By December, Isaac had found new work at a smaller firm across town. Estelle breathed easier. See? A temporary setback, nothing more. But in March, he quit. The work environment was toxic, he told her over coffee at her kitchen table. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted his cup. My supervisor had it out for me from day one. Did you talk to HR? Estelle asked. What's the point? It's a boys' club. They weren't going to take my side. She wanted to push, to ask more questions, but the look on his face stopped her. Instead, she wrote another check, $800 this time. Just until I find something better, Isaac said. I've got some promising leads. The third job came in May and lasted until September. On a Thursday afternoon, Estelle stopped by Isaac's apartment with a casserole. She'd made too much, or so she told herself. Isaac answered the door in sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt. It was 2 p.m. Hey, Mama. His words were slightly slurred. What are you doing here? Behind him, she could see the apartment. Dishes piled in the sink, empty beer bottles on the coffee table, curtains drawn against the daylight. I brought you some dinner, she said, holding up the dish. Are you feeling all right? You don't look well. I'm fine. He took the casserole without inviting her in. Just tired. Long week. Isaac, it's Thursday afternoon. Shouldn't you be at work? His jaw tightened. They let me go. Yesterday. Happy now? Baby, of course I'm not happy. You need to stop babying me, Mom. The sudden shout made her flinch. I'm almost 30 years old. I don't need you showing up with food and checking on me like I'm some kind of invalid. I was just trying to... Well, don't. He stepped back and closed the door. Estelle stood on the concrete walkway outside his apartment, the autumn wind cold against her face, and tried not to cry. Something was very, very wrong with her son, but she didn't know what, and he wouldn't let her close enough to find out. Isaac had married Corinne 2 years ago, a small ceremony at City Hall that Estelle had learned about only 3 days beforehand. We wanted to keep it simple, Isaac had explained, but Estelle couldn't shake the feeling that she'd been deliberately excluded. Corinne was 38, 10 years older than Isaac, an accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown. She was polished and professional, with sleek dark hair and a wardrobe that spoke of money Estelle knew Isaac didn't have. Their conversations were always pleasant, but distant, like talking to a bank teller. Estelle tried. She invited them to Sunday dinners, sent birthday cards, asked about Corinne's work. But there was a wall there, invisible but impenetrable. By the fall, Isaac was canceling their plans more often than keeping them. 4 Sunday dinners in 6 weeks, each with a different excuse. Corinne wasn't feeling well. They had plans with her family. Isaac had to work late. Something had come up. Estelle, honey, you need to talk to him, Gloria said over coffee one October morning. They sat in Gloria's sunny kitchen, the remains of homemade biscuits between them. I've tried. He gets defensive. Then try harder. Gloria's voice was gentle but firm. Because from where I'm sitting, that boy is in trouble. What kind of trouble? Gloria hesitated, stirring her coffee slowly. I don't know exactly, but my nephew Marcus, you remember Marcus? He works security at Silver Star Casino downtown. He's mentioned seeing Isaac there, more than once. Estelle's stomach dropped. Isaac doesn't gamble. Honey, I'm just telling you what Marcus told me. Marcus must be mistaken. Isaac wouldn't... But even as she said it, she knew. The trembling hands, the weight loss, the evasiveness, the constant need for money. You can't keep giving him cash every time he asks, Gloria continued. You're not helping him. You're enabling him. He's my son. Which is exactly why you need to stop. Gloria reached across the table and took Estelle's hand. I know this is hard. Lord knows I know it's hard. But Thomas is gone, and Isaac is a grown man. He needs to stand on his own 2 feet. Estelle pulled her hand away. You don't understand. But she did understand. That was the problem. She understood that Isaac was spiraling, and she was too afraid to stop him because stopping him meant risking losing him entirely. On November 15th, 3 weeks before Christmas, Isaac showed up at her house unannounced. Estelle was surprised but pleased until she saw his face. "Mama, I need to borrow some money." Not hello, not how are you. Just straight to the request. "How much?" she asked. $2,500 for car repairs. The transmission is shot. $2,500 was a month and a half of her pension. It was new tires for her own car and winter heating bills and the property tax due in January. "Isaac, that's a lot of money." "I know, and I'll pay you back. I promise. I need it now, and I don't have anywhere else to turn." Something in his voice, desperation mixed with something else, something that sounded almost like anger, made her hesitate. "Let me think about it," she said. Isaac's expression hardened. "I thought I could count on you, Mom." The words landed like a punch. "You can count on me. I just need to check my account, make sure I have enough to cover my own bills. Forget it." He turned toward the door. "Isaac, wait." But he was already leaving. Estelle watched through the window as he got into his car, the same car that supposedly needed a new transmission, and drove away. She wrote him a check that evening and mailed it the next day. She told herself she was being a good mother. Deep down, she knew better. December arrived with cold rain and the kind of darkness that settles into your bones. Estelle spent the first 3 weeks of the month preparing for Christmas with a determination that bordered on manic. She had a secret. A good secret. The best secret. On December 10th, she'd sat in the office of Martin Crawford, the attorney who'd handled Thomas's estate 5 years ago. Martin was semi-retired now, working from a small office above a coffee shop downtown, but he'd agreed to see her on short notice. "I want to transfer my house to Isaac," she'd told him. "As a Christmas gift." Martin had leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Estelle, that's a substantial gift. Have you thought this through?" "I've thought of nothing else for months." She'd pulled out the folder she'd prepared. Property deed, recent appraisal, $480,000. Her financial documents showing she could afford to live elsewhere. "I'll move to a small apartment, something manageable. Isaac and Corinne can have the house, start their lives without mortgage payments hanging over them." "What does Isaac think about this?" "He doesn't know yet. It's a surprise." Martin had studied her for a long moment. "Estelle, forgive me for asking, but is everything all right between you and your son?" "Of course," she'd lied. "Why wouldn't it be?" Martin had drawn up the papers. She'd signed them on December 15th, then tucked them into a red folder tied with a gold ribbon. On Christmas Day, she'd hand Isaac the folder and watch his face light up. She'd planned the moment 100 times in her mind. This would fix everything. Financial stress was clearly what had been weighing on Isaac. Once that pressure was lifted, he'd be himself again. The son who used to help Thomas in the garage. The boy who'd brought her dandelions and called them roses. She decorated her house with lights, baked cookies, wrapped small presents. She bought a 6-pound turkey even though it was just the 3 of them. She made Thomas's favorite sweet potato casserole, the recipe written in his mother's handwriting on a grease-stained index card. On December 23rd, she called Isaac's cell phone to confirm dinner plans for Christmas Day. Corinne answered. "Hey, Estelle." The woman's voice was cool, distracted. "Isaac's in the shower." "Oh, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure you're both still coming for Christmas dinner. I'm making turkey and actually, we need to talk to you about that." There was a pause, the sound of movement. "Hold on." Estelle heard muffled conversation, Corinne's voice sharp even through the barrier of a hand over the phone. Then Isaac came on the line. "Hey, Mom." "Hi, baby. I was just confirming for Christmas." "Yeah, about that." He sounded strained, tired. "We can't make it this year." The words hit her like cold water. "What? Why not?" "Corinne's family is hosting, and it's important to her. Her parents really want us there." "But Isaac, we always—" "I know, Mom, but things change. We can't always do everything the way we've always done them." In the background, Estelle could hear Corinne say something she couldn't quite make out. Whatever it was made Isaac's voice change, become harder, colder. Look, I have to go. We'll see you another time, okay? But I have something special planned. Mom. His tone had an edge now. Please don't do this. Don't do what? I'm not doing anything. I'm just saying I'd like to see my son on Christmas. And then Isaac exploded. Stop it! The shout was so loud Estelle jerked the phone away from her ear. Just stop with the guilt trips and the manipulation. I am so sick of this. Isaac, what are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. His voice was ragged with fury. Every holiday, every phone call, it's the same thing. Come see me, Isaac. I'm all alone, Isaac. Don't you love your poor widowed mother? Well, you know what? I'm done. Estelle's legs felt weak. She sat down hard in the kitchen chair. Baby, please calm down. I never said, don't you dare show up at Corinne's parents' house tomorrow. Don't call, don't text, don't send your pathetic little guilt trip messages. Just stay home, old woman. Stay home and leave us the hell alone. The words old woman cut deeper than the rest. Her son, her boy, had just called her an old woman. Isaac, please. You've never let me be my own man. Dad's dead and you still won't let me live my own life. You hover and you smother and you use your money to control me. Well, I don't need your money and I don't need you. We don't want you there. We don't need your drama. Just leave us alone. The line went dead. Estelle sat in her kitchen, the phone pressed to her ear, listening to the silence. Her hands were shaking. The house around her, so carefully decorated, suddenly felt like a tomb. The red folder with the house transfer papers sat on the counter where she'd left it that morning, the gold ribbon catching the light from the Christmas tree in the corner. She'd been going to give him everything. Her home. Her security. Everything Thomas had worked for. And her son, her only child, had just called her an old woman and told her to stay out of his life. Estelle set the phone down carefully. She walked to the counter and picked up the red folder. Her hands were still shaking as she opened it, reading the first line of the transfer deed. I, Estelle Whitaker, hereby grant and convey to Isaac James Whitaker. She closed the folder, and in that moment, something in her broke, or maybe something that had been broken for a long time, finally snapped back into place. Her son didn't want her in his life. Fine. He wouldn't get her house either. Estelle didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, the same kind she'd used for lesson planning during her 31 years teaching high school English, and made a list. At the top, she wrote, "The truth." Then she began to document, with the same methodical approach she'd brought to grading essays, everything that had happened over the past 18 months. Money given to Isaac. November 2024, $1,000, first job loss. December 2024, $800, second job. March 2025, $500, unspecified emergency. June 2025, $10,200, rent assistance. August 2025, $900, car insurance, he said. September 2025, $1,400, credit card payment, he said. November 2025, $2,500 car transmission, he said. Total, $8,300, and she stared at the number. Over $8,000 in a year. She lived on a pension of $2,100 a month and Social Security. That money represented nearly 4 months of her income. Had he paid back any of it? She flipped to a new page and wrote, Repayments, $0. Next, she listed the visits and phone calls. Initiated by me, 23 visits, approximately 40 phone calls. Initiated by Isaac, 2 visits, both when he needed money. 0 phone calls. She documented the job losses, the excuses, the deflections, the way he'd avoided looking at her directly for months, the trembling hands, the weight loss, the day drinking. By the time dawn began to lighten the sky outside her window, Estelle had filled 6 pages with evidence of what she'd been refusing to see. Her son had been using her. But why? What could possibly require this much money? Car repairs didn't cost $1,500 every few months. Rent and insurance didn't require constant emergency loans. Unless... Gloria's words came back to her. Marcus sees him at the casino. Gambling. The words sat heavy in her mind. Addiction. Debt. Her son was in trouble. Real trouble. And instead of coming to her honestly, instead of asking for real help, he'd been bleeding her dry while pushing her away. And she'd let him, because she was terrified of losing him. Well, he'd made his choice clear enough last night, hadn't he? At 8 o'clock on Christmas Eve morning, there was a knock at Estelle's door. Gloria stood on the porch with a bag of bagels and a thermos of coffee, her face creased with worry. "I knew you wouldn't sleep," she said, pushing past Estelle into the house. "And I knew you wouldn't eat, so I'm here to make sure you do both." They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Estelle had spent the night documenting her son's betrayal, and Gloria poured coffee into 2 mugs. "Tell me what happened," Gloria said. So Estelle told her. Every word of Isaac's tirade, the cruelty, the rage, the dismissal. When she finished, Gloria was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Honey, I need to tell you something. I should have told you weeks ago, but I didn't want to hurt you." "What is it?" "It's about Isaac and the casino." Gloria pulled out her phone and scrolled through her messages. She turned the screen toward Estelle, showing a text conversation with someone named Marcus. Marcus. "Aunt Gloria, that guy you asked about, Isaac Whitaker? He's here right now. 3rd time this week." Marcus. "He just lost $800 on blackjack. Looked pretty shook up about it." Marcus. "The wife's here too. She's on the slots." The timestamp was from Tuesday, 3 days ago. "The wife?" Estelle's voice came out as a whisper. "Corinne." Gloria scrolled to another message. "Marcus has been keeping an eye out since I asked him to. Estelle, honey, they're there all the time, 2-3 times a week, and they're not playing penny slots." Marcus. "Talk to one of the pit bosses. Your guy's got markers here. Casino credit. He's in for at least 30,000, maybe more." Marcus. "The wife's probably another $20.25K. They're drowning." The number swam in front of Estelle's eyes. $30,000. Plus 25,000 more. $55,000 in gambling debt. "That's not even counting what they might owe to private lenders," Gloria said softly. "Or loan sharks." Loan sharks? The term sounded absurd, like something from a movie. Marcus says that's usually what happens when the casino cuts people off. They go to worse places for money. Gloria reached across the table and took Estelle's hand. "That's why he kept asking you for money, Estelle. Not for car repairs or rent. For gambling debts." Estelle pulled her hand away and stood up, walking to the window. Outside, the morning was gray and cold, a light rain beginning to fall. "The jobs," she said. "The real reasons he lost those jobs. Marcus asked around, called in some favors." Gloria's voice was gentle. "The first company let him go because he took a paycheck advance against company policy and then asked for another one the next week. They restructured him right out. The second job, he borrowed money from 3 different colleagues and never paid them back. Created a toxic environment, so they encouraged him to resign. The third job..." "Stop." Estelle's voice was flat. "I don't want to know." "Yes, you do. Because you need to understand this isn't something you caused and isn't something you can fix." Gloria stood and came to stand beside her friend. "The third job suspected him of expense fraud, padding his receipts, submitting fake invoices. They didn't press charges, but they let him go. Fraud, theft, lies. Her son, her golden boy, her electrical engineer with a 3.8 GPA, was a thief and a liar." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Estelle asked. "Because I didn't have proof until Marcus confirmed it all. And because..." Gloria's voice broke slightly. "Because I know what it's like to love someone who's destroying themselves. My brother drank himself to death, remember? I kept making excuses for him until the day he crashed his car into a telephone pole." They stood together in silence, watching the rain. Finally, Estelle said, "I was going to give him my house." "What?" Estelle walked to the counter and picked up the red folder with the transfer papers. She handed it to Gloria. Gloria read the first page, then looked up at Estelle with something like horror in her eyes. "This house is worth $480,000. I was going to give it to him for Christmas. Sign it over, free and clear. Let him and Corinne live here while I move to a small apartment. Estelle laughed, but there was no humor in it. I thought it would solve everything. Give him financial security. Take away his stress. Estelle, he would have taken this house and used it as collateral for a loan, wouldn't he? To pay off his gambling debts. And then when he couldn't stop gambling, when the debts came back, he'd have lost this house, my house, Thomas's house, to the bank, or the casino, or the loan sharks. Gloria didn't argue because they both knew it was true. What are you going to do? Gloria asked. Estelle took the folder back and set it carefully on the table. I'm going to sell my house to someone who isn't Isaac, and I'm going to do it before he can manipulate me into changing my mind. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. At 10:30 on Christmas Eve, Estelle called Martin Crawford's cell phone. Estelle, Merry Christmas Eve, he answered, sounding surprised. Is everything all right? No, she said. Everything is not all right. I need to sell my house immediately. To anyone except Isaac. There was a pause. What happened? She told him. Not everything. She had her pride. But enough. The phone call. The gambling addiction. The realization that her gift would have enabled a crime. When she finished, Martin was quiet for a long moment. Estelle, I understand you're upset, and you have every right to be. But selling a house takes time. We're talking weeks, maybe months, especially over the holidays. I don't have months, Martin. If I wait, I'll lose my nerve. Or Isaac will show up with apologies and promises, and I'll believe him because I want to believe him. I need to do this now while I still have the strength. Another pause. Then Neb. There might be a way. I have a client, Richard Morrison, a real estate investor. He buys properties for cash, closes quickly, but Estelle, you won't get full market value. Maybe $385,000. Maybe $400,000 if we're lucky. Nearly $100,000 less than the house was worth. But what was she really losing? A dream that was already dead. A son who saw her as an ATM, not a mother. Set up the meeting, she said. Estelle, please think about this. Sleep on it. It's Christmas Eve. Spend the day considering your options. I've thought about nothing else all night, Martin. My son doesn't want me in his life. Fine, but he doesn't get to profit from throwing me away. Call your investor. Tell him I'll sell. At least wait until after Christmas. Martin! Her voice was steel. Set up the meeting, please. She could hear him typing. All right. Richard can meet us tomorrow, Christmas Day, 2 p.m. at my office. Are you absolutely certain about this? I've never been more certain of anything. After she hung up, Estelle sat at her kitchen table and looked around at the house she'd lived in for 43 years. The house where she and Thomas had raised Isaac. Where they'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases and ordinary Tuesday dinners. The house that held every memory of her adult life. And she felt nothing. No grief, no regret, just a cold, clear certainty. Her son had taught her a valuable lesson. Love without respect is worthless, and no amount of money or property could buy back what had already been lost. She picked up her phone and unblocked Isaac's number, just long enough to see the missed calls and texts. Mom, please answer. I'm sorry I was stressed. Can we talk about Christmas? Mom, please don't be mad. 12 missed calls. 7 text messages, all sent in the 3 hours after he'd screamed at her to leave him alone. Estelle deleted them all and blocked his number again. Then she called Riverside Senior Community, the retirement complex she'd looked at briefly the year before. Do you have any 2-bedroom condos available? She asked. We have one left, the woman on the phone said. Just came on the market last week. It's beautiful. 5th floor, park view, balcony. How much? $180,000. Estelle did the math in her head. If she sold the house for $385,000, paid off the few remaining bills, she'd have over $200,000 left. More than enough to buy the condo and live comfortably for the rest of her life. I'll take it, she said. Sight unseen. Don't you want to come see it first? No, Estelle said. "I trust you. Send me the paperwork." She hung up and sat in the silence of her kitchen. Outside, the rain had stopped and weak sunlight was breaking through the clouds. Tomorrow was Christmas Day. She would spend it in a lawyer's office, signing away her past to protect her future. And Isaac would get exactly what he'd asked for, nothing. Christmas morning arrived cold and bright. Estelle woke at 6 a.m. in the same chair where she'd fallen asleep around 3, her neck stiff, her mouth dry. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, Thomas's grandfather clock, the one his father had built by hand in 1952. She made coffee and stood at the kitchen window, watching the sun rise over the houses across the street. The Hendersons' place was already lit up, their 3 kids probably tearing through presents. The Martinez family next door had cars in the driveway, relatives visiting for the holiday. Estelle's house was dark except for the kitchen light. The Christmas tree in the living room stood unlit, unplugged. She'd taken down all the decorations the night before, packing them into boxes with mechanical efficiency. The ornaments Thomas had loved. The stockings she'd hung every year since Isaac was born. The ceramic nativity scene from her mother. All of it, boxed and stacked in the garage. She wouldn't need them where she was going. At 10 a.m., she began to pack. Not everything. That would come later, after the sale closed. But the essentials, the things that mattered. Thomas's books went into boxes first. His collection of westerns, his biographies, his dog-eared copy of Lonesome Dove that he'd read every summer. Next, the photo albums, their wedding, Isaac's baby pictures, family vacations to the Oregon coast. Her mother's china, wrapped carefully in newspaper. Thomas's watch, his wedding ring, the toolbox he'd carried to every job site for 30 years. By noon, she'd filled 6 boxes. The house phone rang. She didn't answer. It rang again an hour later. Still, she ignored it. At 1:30, she loaded the boxes into her car, made one final walk through the house that had been her home for 43 years, and drove to Martin Crawford's office. Estelle arrived at Martin's office at 10 minutes before 2. Richard Morrison was already there, a tall man in his 50s with steel gray hair and a firm handshake. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry. He simply presented his offer, $385,000, cash, closing in 3 business days. Estelle signed the preliminary agreement without hesitation. They were reviewing the timeline, inspection waived, title search expedited, closing set for December 27th, when Martin's desk phone rang. "I'm in a meeting," Martin said into the receiver. His secretary's voice came through, muffled but urgent. Martin's expression shifted. "Tell him I'll call him back." "Problem?" Richard asked. "Nothing that concerns this transaction," Martin said, but he looked at Estelle. "Isaac's called my office 4 times in the past hour." "How did he know?" Estelle asked. "I don't know, but he's agitated." Estelle's phone, which she'd set to silent, showed 17 missed calls from unknown numbers. Isaac must have been calling from different phones, trying to get through. "He doesn't have any legal standing to stop this sale," Martin said. "The property is in your name alone." "I know," Estelle said. "He won't stop me." She was wrong. 10. They finished the meeting at 3:15. Estelle drove home to find Isaac's car in her driveway, and Isaac and Corinne sitting on her porch steps. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. For a moment, she considered simply driving past, going to Gloria's house, avoiding this confrontation. But no, this was still her house. For 3 more days, at least. She pulled into the driveway and cut the engine. Isaac stood immediately. Even from inside the car, she could see he looked terrible, unshaven, hair uncombed, wearing yesterday's clothes. Corinne stood beside him, her arms crossed, her expression cold and calculating. Estelle got out of the car slowly, her purse over one shoulder. "Mom," Isaac's voice cracked. "Please, we need to talk." "There's nothing to discuss." She moved toward the front door, but Isaac stepped in front of her. "Don't do this," he said. "Please don't do this." "Let me pass, Isaac." Dorothy McKenzie posted on Facebook about an investor looking at houses on this street. She was worried about property values. Corinne's voice was sharp, accusatory. We put it together. You're selling the house. Damn neighborhood busybodies. Estelle had forgotten about Dorothy's obsessive social media presence. What I do with my property is my business, Estelle said evenly. The hell it is! Corinne's composure cracked. You promised Isaac this house. I never promised anything. I planned to give it to him. Plans change. Isaac grabbed her arm, not hard, but firm enough to stop her movement. Mom, if this is about the phone call, I'm sorry. I was stressed. I was angry. I didn't mean... Let go of me. Her voice was ice. He dropped her arm immediately. Please, just listen to me for 5 minutes. Against her better judgment, Estelle stopped, waited. I screwed up, Isaac said. His eyes were red-rimmed, desperate. I said terrible things, and I'm sorry. I'll apologize 1,000 times if that's what you need, but you can't sell this house, not like this, not out of spite. Spite? The word came out harder than she'd intended. You think this is about spite? What else could it be? Corinne demanded. You get your feelings hurt, so you punish Isaac by taking away what's rightfully his. Rightfully his? Estelle's composure finally cracked. This house is mine. Mine and Thomas's. We bought it. We paid for it. Isaac has no right to it whatsoever. He's your son, Corinne shrieked, which is why I was going to give it to him. Estelle's voice rose to match Corinne's. I had the papers drawn up. I was going to hand him this house, free and clear, worth nearly $500,000 on Christmas Day. The words hung in the cold air. Isaac's face went white. What? I was going to give you everything, Estelle said, her voice dropping back to something quieter, more dangerous. This house, my security, everything your father worked for, and you called me an old woman and told me to stay out of your life. No, Isaac whispered. No, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know, because it was supposed to be a surprise, a gift, because despite everything, despite the job losses and the borrowed money you never repaid, and the canceled dinners in the distance, I still loved you. I still wanted to help you. Mom, but you didn't want my help. You wanted my money. There's a difference. Corinne's face had gone from angry to calculating. Okay, you were going to give us the house. That's wonderful, Estelle. So just do it. Give us the house now. We'll forget about the phone call. No! What do you mean, no? Corinne's voice climbed again. You just said you were going to give it to him. I was. Past tense. That offer is no longer on the table. You can't do this. Corinne took a step forward. That house was supposed to... She stopped abruptly. Supposed to what? Estelle asked quietly. Isaac shot Corinne a look that screamed, shut up, but it was too late. Supposed to save us, Corinne finished, her voice dropping. We owe money, Estelle. A lot of money. We're drowning. That house equity could have paid off your gambling debts? Estelle finished. The silence that followed was absolute. Isaac's face went from white to gray. How did you... Gloria's nephew Marcus works at Silver Star Casino. He's seen you there, regularly. You and Corinne both. Estelle's voice was calm now, clinical. Poker, blackjack, slots. $30,000 in debt to the casino alone, Marcus estimates, plus whatever you owe to private lenders. It's not that much, Isaac said weakly. How much is it then? 40,000? 50? He wouldn't meet her eyes. 60,000, Corinne said flatly. We owe $60,000, and we've got loan sharks threatening Isaac. Actual loan sharks, Estelle. They came to our apartment last week. If we don't pay them soon... You were going to use my house as collateral, Estelle said. It wasn't a question. Isaac's silence was answer enough. You would have taken this house, this gift, and immediately mortgaged it to pay off gambling debts. And when the debts came back, because they always come back with addicts, you would have lost this house. My house. Thomas's house. To the bank or the casino or the loan sharks. We would have stopped, Isaac said desperately. Once the debts were clear, we would have stopped gambling, I swear. Addicts always say that, Estelle moved past them to her front door. "The house sells on the 27th. Don't contact me again." "Mom!" Isaac's shout was anguished. "You're going to let them hurt me. Those men aren't kidding around. If I don't pay—" Estelle turned back. "Then I suggest you get a job, Isaac. A real job. And keep it this time, because you're not getting another dollar from me." She went inside and locked the door behind her. Through the window, she watched Isaac collapse onto the porch steps, his head in his hands. Corinne stood over him, her mouth moving rapidly, yelling or strategizing. Estelle couldn't tell which. After 10 minutes, they left. Estelle sat in her living room, in the silence, at Sion, and waited to feel something. Regret, guilt, grief. But all she felt was tired and free. December 27th arrived gray and cold. Estelle met Richard Morrison and Martin Crawford at Martin's office at 9 a.m. sharp. The closing took 45 minutes. She signed her name on what felt like 100 documents. Richard signed his. The title company representative notarized everything with practiced efficiency. At 10:17 a.m., it was done. Richard handed her a cashier's check for $385,000. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mrs. Whitaker," he said, shaking her hand. "I promise to take good care of the place." After he left, Martin looked at Estelle with something like concern in his eyes. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. Isaac called me 14 times yesterday. He's threatening to sue for breach of verbal contract." "Let him sue. He'll lose." "I know, but Estelle, he's your son." "He was my son," she said quietly. "I don't know what he is now." She took the check to her bank and deposited it immediately. The funds would be available in 1 business day. She called Riverside Senior Community from the bank parking lot and arranged to wire them $180,000 for the condo on the 5th floor with the park view. That left her with $205,000. $205,000 to invest, to live on, to build whatever remained of her life. It was more than enough. She spent the afternoon at Gloria's house, drinking tea and not talking about Isaac. Gloria's daughter had come for Christmas and was still visiting, and her grandchildren filled the house with noise and life, and the kind of chaos Estelle found she didn't miss as much as she'd thought she would. That evening, back at the house that was no longer hers, Estelle continued packing. She had until January 15th to move out. Richard had been generous about the timeline, but she wanted to leave sooner. Every day in this house felt like living in a museum of her own past. Her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Mrs. Whitaker?" A woman's voice, professional. "This is Detective Sarah Kim with the Portland Police Department Financial Crimes Division. I need to ask you some questions about your son, Isaac Whitaker." Estelle's heart dropped into her stomach. "What's happened?" she asked. "Ma'am, I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Would you be available to come to the precinct tomorrow morning? Tell me now, please." Detective Kim hesitated. "Your son's employer, Henderson Engineering, has filed a criminal complaint. They've discovered evidence of embezzlement, fraudulent expense reports, fake vendor invoices. We're estimating approximately $8,000 over the past 6 months. Estelle sat down heavily on the couch. "I see. We're in the early stages of investigation, but I need to ask, did you have any knowledge of these activities?" "None whatsoever. My son and I haven't spoken since Christmas Eve." "I see. Can you come in tomorrow to give a formal statement?" "Yes, of course." After the detective hung up, Estelle sat in the gathering darkness of her living room, staring at nothing. Embezzlement. Her son was now a criminal, not just a gambler, not just a liar, a thief. And she understood, with sudden horrible clarity, that if she'd given him this house, he would have used the equity to pay restitution and avoid prosecution. She would have unwittingly helped him cover up a crime. The house sale hadn't just protected her heart. It had protected her from becoming an accessory. By New Year's Day, Isaac and Corinne had launched a campaign. The first call came from Patricia Greenwood, Corinne's mother. Estelle had met her exactly 3 times, at the courthouse wedding, at a stilted lunch 2 months later, and at Thomas's funeral, where Patricia had spent most of the service on her phone. "Estelle, this is Patricia. The woman's voice was smooth, practiced, a therapist's voice. I'm calling because I'm very concerned about the situation between you and the children. The children. As if Isaac and Corinne were innocent victims instead of manipulative adults in their 30s. Hello, Patricia. Corinne is devastated, Estelle. Absolutely devastated. And Isaac, well, I'm sure you can imagine how he's feeling. I'm sure I can. I'm going to be frank with you, Estelle. I've been a family therapist for 30 years, and what you're doing shows clear signs of emotional dysregulation. Selling your home impulsively, cutting off your only child. These are red flags for depression or early cognitive decline. The implication landed like a slap. Estelle forced herself to speak calmly. I appreciate your concern, Patricia, but I've been evaluated by my physician. My mental health is excellent. A general practitioner isn't really qualified to diagnose these things. Patricia's tone was patient, condescending. I'd like to recommend a colleague of mine, Dr. Benjamin Summers. He specializes in geriatric psychology. I've already spoken to him about your case. You discussed my private medical information with a stranger? I'm trying to help you, Estelle. Isaac is my son-in-law. Corinne is my daughter. I can't stand by and watch you destroy this family over what amounts to a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Isaac was stressed. People say things they don't mean when they're overwhelmed. Surely you, as a mother, understand that. The manipulation was surgical, practiced. Estelle could see exactly where Corinne had learned her techniques. Thank you for calling, Patricia. I won't be needing Dr. Summers' services. Estelle, please reconsider. Estelle hung up. 2 days later, Father John from St. Mary's called. Estelle, I had a visit from Isaac and Corinne yesterday. His voice was careful, troubled. They're very worried about you. Her stomach sank. They'd gone to her church, her sanctuary. They told me about the house sale. Father John continued. Estelle, is everything all right? Is there something going on I should know about? Did they tell you what Isaac said to me on Christmas Eve? They mentioned a disagreement over holiday plans. He screamed at me to stay away from his life. He called me an old woman. He told me never to contact him again. Estelle's voice was flat, factual. 2 hours later, when he discovered I was serious about respecting his wishes, he changed his tune. Silence on the other end. Father John, my son has a gambling addiction. He's $60,000 in debt to loan sharks. He was going to use my house, the house I was giving him as a gift, to cover those debts. And when I refused to enable his addiction, he enlisted his mother-in-law and apparently his priest to pressure me into compliance. Estelle, I'm sure there's been some miscommunication. There hasn't. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have packing to do. She hung up before he could respond. But the damage was done. By the following Sunday, when Estelle attended services, she could feel the whispers, the sidelong glances, the way conversation stopped when she approached the coffee hour. Dorothy Mackenzie cornered her by the pastry table. Estelle, dear, I heard about the house sale. Are you all right? When Isaac came by asking about it, he looked just devastated. He said you weren't yourself lately. I'm perfectly fine, Dorothy. Well, if you ever need someone to talk to. Dorothy's eyes gleamed with that particular excitement people get when they're close to drama. We're all worried about you. Estelle excused herself and left early. By mid-January, the Whisper campaign had spread through her entire social circle. Women she'd known for decades suddenly approached her with concern. Invitations to book club and quilting group quietly stopped coming. Isaac and Corinne were systematically poisoning her community, painting her as an unstable old woman acting irrationally. She was being erased from her own life. On January 15th, the day Estelle was scheduled to vacate her old house, Gloria took action. She hosted a coffee morning at her place, sending out invitations to every woman in their church circle. Just a little get-together, the invitation read. Coffee and conversation. Estelle arrived to find Dorothy Mackenzie already there, along with Susan Park from the quilting group, Jennifer Walsh from book club, and half a dozen other women from St. Mary's. "What's this about?" Estelle whispered to Gloria. "The truth," Gloria said simply. Once everyone had coffee and pastries, Gloria stood in her living room and cleared her throat. "Ladies, thank you for coming. I called you all here because there's been a lot of talk lately about Estelle, and I think it's time you heard the real story." She gestured to a young man sitting in the corner, Marcus, her nephew. He stood awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable. "This is Marcus. He works security at Silver Star Casino downtown. Marcus, tell them what you told me." Marcus cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitaker's son, Isaac, and his wife, Corinne, are regular customers at the casino. I see them 2-3 times a week. They play high-stakes games, blackjack, poker. I've personally witnessed them lose thousands of dollars in a single night." The room went silent. "They have markers at the casino," Marcus continued. "That means they've borrowed money from us to gamble with. Between the two of them, they're into the casino for probably $35,000-$40,000. And that's just what they owe us. Word is they've got private debts too. Loan sharks." Dorothy's hand went to her mouth. "Estelle gave Isaac over $8,000 in the past year," Gloria said. "Every penny went to gambling debts. He lied to her repeatedly, told her he needed money for car repairs, for rent, for emergencies. All lies." "The house Estelle was going to give Isaac," Marcus added. "He was planning to use it as collateral for a consolidation loan, to pay off the gambling debts and avoid the loan sharks. My pit boss told me Isaac had been in asking about how much equity he could pull out of a house worth $500,000. Gloria pulled out her phone and played a recording. Estelle recognized her own voice, shaking with hurt. "I just want to see my son on Christmas." Then Isaac's voice, loud and vicious. "Stop it! Just stop with the guilt trips and the manipulation. Don't you dare show up at Corinne's parents' house. Just stay home, old woman. Stay home and leave us the hell alone." Several women gasped. Jennifer Walsh's eyes filled with tears. "That," Gloria said, stopping the recording, "is how Isaac Whitaker spoke to the woman who was about to give him a house worth nearly $500,000. And when Estelle protected herself by selling that house to someone else, Isaac and Corinne started a campaign to make her look unstable. They went to her priest. They called Corinne's therapist mother to suggest Estelle has dementia. They spread rumors through this entire community." Gloria looked around the room. "So before any of you judge Estelle for setting a boundary with an adult son who abused and used her, maybe ask yourselves, what would you have done?" The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Susan Park spoke. "Estelle, I owe you an apology. I believed what Isaac told Father John. I thought, I'm so sorry." "We all are," Jennifer added. "We should have asked you directly instead of listening to gossip." Dorothy Mackenzie, to her credit, looked genuinely ashamed. "I'll delete those Facebook posts, and I'll post a correction." "Don't," Estelle said quietly. "I don't need public vindication. I just need my friends to know the truth." After the coffee morning ended and the other women left, Estelle and Gloria sat together on Gloria's porch. "Thank you," Estelle said. "You shouldn't have had to be defended in the first place," Gloria replied. "But at least now they know. Do you think it'll make a difference?" "The truth always makes a difference, honey. Maybe not right away, but eventually." The next morning, Estelle went to the police precinct for her interview with Detective Kim. The detective was younger than Estelle had expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a kind smile. She led Estelle to a small interview room and offered her coffee, which Estelle declined. "Mrs. Whitaker, thank you for coming in. I know this must be difficult." "Just tell me what Isaac did." Detective Kim opened a file folder. "Your son was employed at Henderson Engineering from September through January 15th of this year. During that time, he submitted approximately 63 expense reports claiming reimbursement for business-related purchases." She slid several documents across the table. Estelle recognized Isaac's signature. "The company's accounting department flagged irregularities last month. Upon investigation, they discovered that 41 of those expense reports were partially or completely fraudulent." Detective Kim showed Estelle receipt after receipt. Dinners at restaurants Isaac had never attended. Hotel stays for business trips that never happened. Equipment purchases from vendors that didn't exist. He created fake invoices, the detective explained. Used Photoshop or similar software to generate receipts that looked legitimate. The company accountant got suspicious when 3 different restaurants supposedly used the same receipt template. How much? Estelle's voice was barely a whisper. $8,247. The same amount Estelle had given him over the past year, almost to the dollar. He was using company money to supplement what he was taking from you, Detective Kim said gently. The timeline matches. Every time you gave him money, his fraudulent expense claims decreased for a few weeks. Then they'd start again. Estelle stared at the documents. What happens now? Henderson Engineering has filed criminal charges. Felony theft. If convicted, your son could face up to 5 years in prison and a $1,000 fine. More likely, if he pleads guilty, we're looking at probation and restitution. Will he go to prison? Probably not for a first offense, especially if he cooperates. But he'll have a criminal record. He'll lose his engineering license. And he'll have to pay back every penny, plus penalties and interest. Detective Kim leaned forward slightly. Miss Whitaker, I need to ask you something, and please understand I'm not accusing you of anything. Did you have any knowledge of your son's fraudulent activities? None. Did he ever mention using your house as collateral for a loan? Estelle's heart stuttered. How did you know about the house? We obtained a warrant for your son's email and text messages. We found extensive communication between Isaac and Corinne discussing plans to use house equity to pay restitution and legal fees, thereby avoiding prosecution. There were emails to mortgage brokers, inquiries about home equity lines of credit, discussions with a lawyer about the best way to handle embezzlement charges. Detective Kim pulled out more documents, printed emails, text message transcripts. One email from Isaac to a mortgage broker dated December 20th. My mother is giving me her house for Christmas. It's worth $480,000, free and clear. How quickly can we pull $150,000 in equity? I need the money urgently for a legal matter. Another text from Corinne to Isaac, dated December 28th. She actually sold it? That crazy bitch sold our house? How are we supposed to pay your lawyer now? Mrs. Whitaker, Detective Kim said quietly, if you had given your son that house, he would have immediately used it to cover up a crime. You would have been listed as a co-borrower on those equity loans. If Isaac defaulted, which he almost certainly would have given his gambling addiction, you could have been held financially liable. You could have lost the house anyway, plus been sued for the balance. The room seemed to tilt. So by selling the house, Estelle couldn't finish the sentence. You protected yourself from significant legal and financial liability, possibly criminal liability depending on what Isaac told the mortgage brokers. Detective Kim closed the folder. I'd say you had excellent timing. After the interview, Estelle sat in her car in the precinct parking lot for 20 minutes, just breathing. She'd thought she was protecting her heart. She'd actually been protecting her freedom. By mid-February, Estelle had moved into her new condo at Riverside Senior Community. The space was modern and bright, with large windows overlooking a small park where joggers ran loops around a duck pond. She'd made friends with her neighbor, Margaret Sullivan, a retired librarian with a wicked sense of humor and a collection of mystery novels she was eager to share. Life was beginning to feel almost normal again. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, Estelle and Margaret went to lunch at Riverside Cafe, a quiet bistro near the community. They were discussing the book club's latest selection when Margaret suddenly went still, her eyes fixed on something over Estelle's shoulder. Estelle, she said quietly, don't turn around. But Isaac and Corinne just walked in. Estelle's heart began to pound. Are they coming this way? Yes. She turned. Isaac and Corinne were crossing the cafe toward their table. Isaac looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his clothes hung on him, his face was unshaven. Corinne looked harder, sharper, her designer wardrobe replaced with jeans and a plain sweater. Mom! Isaac's voice was soft, pleading. Please, just 5 minutes. That's all we're asking. Every eye in the small cafe was on them now. Estelle could either make a scene or hear them out. She gestured to the empty chairs. 5 minutes. They sat. Isaac pushed a bouquet of white roses across the table, her favorites. Corinne had a gift bag. "I've been seeing a therapist," Isaac said. The words came out rehearsed, practiced. "Twice a week since the new year. We've been talking about my anger issues, my communication problems. Mom, I was abusive to you on that phone call. There's no excuse for it." Estelle said nothing. "I owe you an apology, too," Corinne said, leaning forward. Her eyes were wide, earnest, but something about them reminded Estelle of a snake. "I've been controlling Isaac's relationship with you, and that was wrong. I was jealous of how close you two were. I felt like I could never measure up." It was a masterful performance. If Estelle hadn't known better, she might have believed it. "We want to start over," Isaac continued. "No more missed holidays, no more excuses. We want you in our lives, Mom, actively, regularly, your family." "That's very kind," Estelle said carefully. Isaac and Corinne exchanged a glance. This wasn't going the way they'd planned. Corinne pushed the gift bag toward Estelle. "We want to show you we're serious. Open it." Inside was a leather-bound photo album. On the first page, a photoshopped image of a nursery with text that read, "Coming fall 2026. "We're trying for a baby," Corinne said, her smile widening. "We wanted you to be the first to know. You're going to be a grandmother." Margaret made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a cough. Estelle looked at the photo album, then at Corinne, then at Isaac. "That ultrasound image is from Google," she said quietly. "I can see the watermark in the corner. Getty Images." Corinne's smile froze. "And you're not pregnant," Estelle continued. "You're using a hypothetical baby as leverage, which tells me everything I need to know about your actual motivations." "That's not fair," Isaac started. "Detective Kim told me about your embezzlement charges," Estelle said. "She showed me your emails, the ones where you plan to use my house to pay for your legal defense." The cafe had gone completely silent. Every customer, every server, listening. Isaac's face went white. "Mom, how did you—" "You didn't want my house as a gift, Isaac. You wanted it to cover up a crime, to pay restitution so you'd avoid prison time." Estelle stood, her voice steady and clear. "You've been using me for money for over a year. You lied about needing car repairs and rent money when really you were feeding a gambling addiction. You stole from your employer. And when I finally protected myself, you tried to destroy my reputation in my own community." "You don't understand," Corinne started. "I understand perfectly. You're desperate. You're in debt. Isaac's facing criminal charges. And you thought you could manipulate me one more time with fake tears and a fake pregnancy and an apology you don't mean." Margaret stood beside Estelle, solid and supportive. Isaac's desperation turned to anger. "You're my mother. You're supposed to help me. I tried to help you. I gave you thousands of dollars. I was going to give you a house worth $500,000, and you threw it all away on poker tables and slot machines." Corinne's face twisted with rage. "You self-righteous bitch! You think you're so much better than us. You're just a lonely old woman playing God with money." "I'm a woman who learned to protect herself from people who saw her as a resource instead of a person," Estelle replied. "Even when those people were family." "Fine." Isaac stood so abruptly his chair fell backward. "Keep your money. I hope it keeps you warm at night when you're rotting in that senior center with no one who gives a damn about you." "Isaac!" Corinne grabbed his arm, aware of the scene they were making. "No! I'm done. She wants to be alone. She can be alone." Isaac's voice was raw with fury. "When she's dying in some hospital bed, don't call me. When she needs help, don't call me. She's dead to me." They stormed out of the cafe. The silence that followed was profound. Then an elderly woman at the next table stood and came over to Estelle. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, dear," she said gently. "But you did the right thing. My son stole from me for years before I finally cut him off. You're braver than I was." A younger woman approached. "My brother has a gambling problem. Watching you set that boundary, thank you. I needed to see that." One by one, strangers came to Estelle's table to offer support, to share their own stories of family betrayal and recovery. Estelle sat down slowly, overwhelmed. "You okay?" Margaret asked, squeezing her hand. "I think so," Estelle said, and she meant it. Over the next several months, Estelle watched Isaac's life unravel from a distance, through court records, through occasional updates from Gloria's nephew Marcus, through the grapevine of her newly restored social circle. In March, Isaac pleaded guilty to felony embezzlement. The judge sentenced him to 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered him to pay $8,247 in restitution to Henderson Engineering, plus penalties and interest, totaling nearly $12,000. His engineering license was suspended for 3 years. He couldn't work in his field, couldn't even use his degree. Corinne's downfall came shortly after. Her own employer, digging deeper after Isaac's arrest, discovered that she'd been submitting fraudulent expense reports too. Smaller amounts, only about $4,000 over 2 years, but enough. She was fired immediately. Her accountant's license was suspended pending an ethics investigation. In April, Corinne filed for divorce. The papers cited irreconcilable differences in financial infidelity. She demanded alimony despite their short marriage and her own income. The judge, unimpressed by 2 criminals fighting over money neither of them had, denied the request. By May, Isaac was working construction, hard physical labor for $16 an hour. His car had been repossessed. He'd moved into a studio apartment in the worst part of town. Corinne moved back in with Patricia, but that relationship soured quickly. Patricia had standards, it turned out, even for her own daughter. When she discovered Corinne had stolen her credit card to pay off a gambling debt, she called the police. The charges were dropped after Corinne agreed to repay the money and move out, but mother and daughter didn't speak anymore. By June, Corinne was living in a shared house with 3 roommates, working retail at a department store, her career in ruins. In late March, Estelle learned that Richard Morrison's development plans had fallen through. Zoning issues, neighborhood opposition, permit delays. The project became too expensive to pursue. In May, he sold the property to a young family named the Hendersons for $515,000, $130,000 more than what Estelle had gotten. But she felt no regret. The speed of the sale had protected her. The money had given her freedom. The Hendersons, Craig and Michelle with 3 children under 10, renovated beautifully. New kitchen, updated bathrooms, fresh paint. They planted flowers in the garden where Thomas's tomatoes used to grow. On a warm afternoon in June, Estelle drove past the old house. Not because she missed it, but because she wanted to see. The yard was full of life. Kids on a swing set, a dog running in circles, Craig grilling on the back patio while Michelle set out plates. The house was happy again. Estelle drove home to Riverside, to her condo with the park view, to Margaret waiting with wine and gossip about the community book club drama. She'd made the right choice. The house had found the family it deserved, and Estelle had found the life she'd been too afraid to claim. By April, Estelle's life had transformed into something she barely recognized and loved completely. Her condo at Riverside Senior Community became more than just a place to live. It became a home in a way the old house hadn't been for years. She filled it with Thomas's books, her mother's china, and new things too. A watercolor painting she'd bought at a local art fair, cheerful yellow curtains for the kitchen, a comfortable reading chair positioned perfectly to catch the afternoon sun. But more than the physical space, it was the people that changed everything. Margaret Sullivan became her closest friend. They met for coffee every morning in the community center, took water aerobics classes together on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and spent evenings on each other's balconies drinking wine and solving the world's problems. "You know what I love about this place?" Margaret said one evening as they watched the sunset over the park. "Nobody asks you to be anything other than yourself. No performance. No roles to play." Estelle understood exactly what she meant. For the first time in decades, she wasn't Thomas's widow, or Isaac's mother, or the teacher, or the church lady. She was just Estelle, and that was enough. She joined the book club and discovered she loved leading discussions. Her decades as an English teacher finally put to use for pleasure instead of grades. She took up painting and found unexpected talent for watercolors. She organized the community's summer barbecue, which drew over 200 residents. In May, she started volunteering at Women's Haven, a domestic violence shelter downtown. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she taught resume writing and interview skills to women rebuilding their lives. One client, a woman named Carmen who'd left her abusive husband with nothing but her 2 children and a garbage bag of clothes, asked Estelle one afternoon, "How did you find the courage to leave?" "Leave what?" Estelle had asked. "Your situation. Margaret told me you left your son because he was abusive. That takes strength I don't know if I have." The word abusive had startled Estelle at first, but sitting there, looking at Carmen's bruised wrists and haunted eyes, she understood. Isaac Arroyo hadn't hit her, but he'd used her, manipulated her, stolen from her, screamed at her, tried to destroy her reputation when she set boundaries. That was abuse, too. Financial abuse. Emotional abuse. "You find courage by realizing you deserve better," Estelle said. "By understanding that love without respect is worthless, and by recognizing that you don't owe anyone access to your life, your money, or your peace, not even family, especially not family who hurt you." Carmen had cried then, the kind of crying that comes from relief and recognition and the terrible freedom of permission. 8 women graduated from the Women's Haven program that spring. Every one of them thanked Estelle specifically. "You showed us it's never too late to choose yourself," one woman said. Estelle transformed her pain into purpose, and in doing so, she healed parts of herself she hadn't known were broken. There was also George Patterson. He lived on the 3rd floor, a retired engineer who'd lost his wife 3 years ago to cancer. They'd met at the community barbecue when he'd complimented her potato salad, and she'd actually laughed, for the first time in months. "My late wife used to make it exactly like this," he'd said. "Secret ingredient is a little bit of mustard, right?" "And a touch of sugar," Estelle had replied. They'd talked for 2 hours that afternoon. He asked her to dinner the following week, then to the symphony, then to a comedy show that had them both laughing until their sides hurt. It wasn't serious. Neither of them wanted serious at their age, with their histories. But it was nice. It was companionship and conversation, and the quiet pleasure of being seen as a woman instead of just a mother or grandmother or widow. "You're radiant lately," Margaret observed one morning. "George is good for you." "Life is good for me," Estelle corrected. But she was smiling. For the first time in years, maybe decades, Estelle woke up excited for the day ahead. Not anxious about Isaac, not grieving Thomas, not performing for her community, just living. She'd spent 76 years learning to be what other people needed. She was spending the rest of her life learning to be herself. On September 15th, Estelle collapsed during water aerobics class. One moment she was laughing at something Margaret said, moving through the chest-deep water in the community pool. The next, her chest constricted with sharp, radiating pain. Her left arm went numb. The room tilted. She heard Margaret scream her name as the world went dark. She woke in the emergency room at Providence Portland Medical Center with an oxygen mask over her face and Margaret holding her hand. "You scared the hell out of me," Margaret said, her voice shaking. Dr. Helen Morrison, Estelle's physician for 15 years, appeared at her bedside. "Estelle, how are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." Her voice came out muffled through the oxygen mask. "Heart attack?" "We're running tests now. Your EKG shows some irregularities, but it doesn't look like a classic myocardial infarction." Dr. Morrison checked the monitors. "I want to keep you overnight for observation." By evening, the diagnosis was clear. Severe panic attack combined with cardiac arrhythmia, both stress-induced. Not a heart attack, but serious nonetheless. Her blood pressure was dangerously high, 160/95. "Estelle, your body is processing decades of stress," Dr. Morrison said, sitting on the edge of the hospital bed. "The situation with Isaac was the breaking point, but this has been building for years. You've been in fight-or-flight mode so long your nervous system doesn't know how to relax." "But I'm happy now," Estelle protested. "Happier than I've been in years." Happiness doesn't erase trauma. Your body is still carrying all that weight. Dr. Morrison pulled up a chair. I'm prescribing medication for the blood pressure and anxiety, but more importantly, I want you to see a therapist. A real one, regularly. And I want you to learn self-care, not just other care. That night, alone in the hospital room, Margaret had finally gone home around midnight. Estelle lay awake thinking, what if she'd had this attack 6 months ago, when she'd still owned the house? What if she'd already transferred it to Isaac and then collapsed? He wouldn't have cared for her. He'd have already had what he wanted. She would have been alone, used up, discarded. Instead, she was here. She had Margaret, who'd ridden in the ambulance and refused to leave her side. She had George, who'd brought her flowers and sat quietly reading to her from the newspaper. She had her community, her friends, her purpose. She'd chosen herself, and that choice had saved her life. In October, Estelle sat in Dr. Rachel Foster's office for her 4th weekly therapy session. The office was warm and comfortable, with soft lighting and a view of trees turning gold and red outside the window. Dr. Foster was younger than Estelle had expected, maybe 50, with kind eyes and an easy manner that made difficult conversations feel possible. Tell me about the letter, Dr. Foster said. Isaac's letter had arrived the previous week, forwarded through Martin Crawford. Handwritten, 3 pages long, raw and honest in a way Isaac had never been before. Estelle had read it a dozen times. Dear Mom, I'm writing this from my Tuesday night Gamblers Anonymous meeting. I've been coming for 3 months now. I have a sponsor. I haven't placed a bet in 93 days. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this. But I need to say it anyway, even if only to the void. You were right about everything. I have a gambling addiction. I've had it since Dad died. Maybe before. It started small. A football bet here, a casino trip there. Something to numb the grief. But it grew. And I let it grow because it was easier than facing what I'd lost. I lied to you. Repeatedly. I stole from you. I used you. I called you terrible names and said terrible things. I tried to take your house. Not as a gift, but as collateral to cover my crimes. And when you protected yourself, I tried to destroy your reputation. There's no excuse for any of it. Corinne and I are divorced now. I'm working construction. I lost my license, my career, my marriage. I'm living in a studio apartment and taking the bus because my car got repossessed. I'm paying restitution for the embezzlement. I've lost everything. And I deserve to lose it. The only thing I didn't deserve to lose was you. But I lost that, too, through my own actions. My sponsor says I need to make amends, but he also says I shouldn't do it for me. I should do it because the person I hurt deserves acknowledgement of the harm I caused. So here it is. I hurt you, deeply, repeatedly. I took your love and your generosity and your trust, and I turned them into weapons against you. I made you doubt yourself. I tried to make you feel crazy when you were the only sane one in the room. I'm sorry doesn't cover it, but I am sorry. I hope you're happy, Mom. I mean that. I hope wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you've found peace. You deserve it more than anyone I know. Live well. Be better than I was. Isaac. How does the letter make you feel? Dr. Foster asked. Sad, Estelle said slowly. Relieved, angry, hopeful, all of it at once. Do you want to reconcile with him? The question sat heavy in the room. Part of me does, Estelle admitted. The mother part, the part that remembers him at 10 years old, helping Thomas fix electrical outlets. The part that watched him graduate and felt so proud. And the other part? The other part knows that reconciliation would require me to put myself back in danger. Emotional danger, at minimum. I can't be his mother and his enabler and his ATM and his punching bag. Not anymore. Dr. Foster nodded. Forgiveness and reconciliation are different things. I know. You can forgive him for your own peace while still maintaining the boundary. I know that too. So what do you want to do? Estelle thought about it. Really thought, not from obligation or guilt or fear, but from a place of honest self-examination. I want to write him back. One letter. I want to acknowledge his apology and his growth. I want to forgive him, genuinely. And then I want to close that door, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. That sounds healthy to me? Does it sound cruel to you? Dr. Foster considered the question. I think cruelty is continuing to enable someone's self-destruction because you're afraid of what they'll think of you. I think boundaries are love. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let someone experience the full weight of their consequences. Estelle nodded slowly. That's what I thought. But I needed to hear it. That evening, Estelle sat at her kitchen table with good stationery and a pen. Not the computer, not an email. This deserved the permanence of ink. Dear Isaac, I received your letter. I believe your apology is genuine. I believe you're trying to change. That matters, and I'm proud of you for facing your addiction. I forgive you. Not because you've earned it, but because I need to release this weight I've been carrying. My therapist says unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I'm done poisoning myself, but forgiveness is not reconciliation. You were right about one thing in your letter. I was overprotective. Your father and I didn't prepare you for failure. We cushioned every fall, fixed every problem, rescued you from every consequence. We thought we were helping. We were actually making you fragile. That's my failure as a parent, and I'm sorry for it. But your addiction, your lies, your theft, your cruelty, those are your choices. I didn't make you gamble. I didn't make you steal from your employer. I didn't make you call me an old woman and tell me to stay out of your life. You made those choices, and you need to rebuild yourself now, not for me, but for you, without my money, my house, or my constant safety net. I have a good life now, Isaac. A life I've built for myself. I have friends who value me, purpose that fulfills me, even romance. I'm painting and volunteering and laughing. For the first time in decades, I'm not performing the role of devoted mother or perfect widow or helpful friend. I'm just Estelle, and I like her. I wish you well. I genuinely hope you beat your addiction. I hope you find honest work and honest love. I hope you become the man your father believed you could be. But I can't be part of that journey. I need to protect my peace, my health, my life. This is goodbye, Isaac. Not from anger, but from love. The kind of love that knows when to hold on and when to let go. Live well. Mom, she sealed the letter and mailed it the next morning through Martin Crawford, with strict instructions. No return address, no forwarding information, no further contact. Then she went home, deleted Isaac's contact from her phone, and told Margaret, "It's done." "How do you feel?" Margaret asked. "Free," Estelle said. And she meant it. Christmas 2027 arrived bright and cold. Estelle stood in the Riverside Senior Community Kitchen at 6 a.m., helping prepare Christmas dinner for 50 residents. She had volunteered to coordinate the meal, and the space was filled with laughter, the smell of roasting turkey, and the chaotic joy of people who'd chosen to be together. "Estelle, the sweet potatoes are burning," Dorothy Hayes called from the oven. A different Dorothy, one who'd become a dear friend. "They're caramelizing, not burning," Estelle shot back, grinning. George appeared with champagne. "Quality control requires day drinking. Community rules." They toasted. They cooked. They told stories. Her life had become rich beyond measure. She'd organized the community painting class, won the spring watercolor contest, introduced half the single residents to each other at the Valentine's Mixer. She'd helped 23 women graduate from Women's Haven's program. She'd traveled to Alaska with Margaret, to Santa Fe with George, to the coast just because she wanted to see the ocean. She had $220,000 in investments now. Her dividend income covered her modest expenses with room to spare. Her blood pressure was controlled, her anxiety managed. She was thriving at 78. Through occasional Google searches, she was human after all, she knew that Isaac was still sober from gambling. 18 months now, still working construction, still living modestly. He'd started dating someone, according to a public Facebook post. A woman named Jennifer who worked at his GA meetings. He was rebuilding his life, without her help. That night, after the Christmas dinner ended and the dishes were washed and the leftover turkey distributed, Estelle and George stood on her balcony watching fireworks over Portland. Some neighborhood display, unauthorized but beautiful. "Regrets?" George asked, handing her champagne. "About Isaac?" "No. I gave him 28 years of love. He threw it away. I gave myself a second chance. That's not cruelty. That's survival." "To second chances, then." They toasted and watched the sky light up in gold and silver. Estelle thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago. Frightened, depleted, desperate to keep a son who didn't want to be kept. That woman had believed her worth came from what she could give others. This woman, this Estelle, knew better. Family wasn't who shared your blood. It was who showed up, who respected you, who saw you as more than what you could provide. She'd spent 76 years learning that lesson. She was spending her remaining years living it. The fireworks burst overhead, painting the night sky in brilliant color, and Estelle smiled. She was home. Finally, truly home.